everybody. On behalf of my fellow co-chairs, both of them here, and the Student Organizing Committee, who you can't see right now, I'm thrilled to welcome you all to the 2021 Yale Philanthropy Conference. The past year has truly been like no other, filled with unimaginable grief wrought by the pandemic, subsequent economic crises, and continued racial injustice. This has further exposed the far too many cracks in our social fabric and the necessity of a more robust and strengthened social sector. We, the organizing team, could not feel more privileged and humbled to be associated with this convening that brings together voices rich with experience and intention to unpack, criticize, unlearn, and relearn the role of philanthropy in today's society. The sessions spread over today and mostly tomorrow will examine philanthropy's power and purposes, question its interplay with democracy, influence, and justice, and reimagine a sustainable, equitable, and resilient way forward. We are very grateful to our platinum sponsors, the Newman's Own Foundation and the J.M. Kaplan Fund, our gold sponsor, the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven, and our silver sponsor, BDO FMA, for their continued support, particularly in this challenging year where we've had to reinvent some basic tenets of this conference to move completely virtual.
While this pandemic has challenged us all in many ways, we are fortunate to have been able to use this virtual platform to extend beyond just the East Coast. With over 1,000 registrants, not only from the West Coast and other parts of the United States, but also from countries like Kenya, Spain, India, and Australia. As you tune in to the various sessions today and tomorrow, we invite you to share in the chat for each session where you're joining us from. We're also immensely thankful for our wonderful Student Organizing Committee for their consistent efforts and intent to make this conference meaningful, as well as to our advisory board, faculty members, and the school staff, without whom none of this would have been possible. Thank you to all the speakers who are joining us today and tomorrow, and for your help towards making this conference what it is. Again, a warm welcome to everyone who's joining for our opening keynote today. We have panels spread across 4 breakout sessions all day tomorrow, beginning at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and our closing keynote during lunch tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Each session will be followed by a 30-minute open networking room for you to continue the conversation with the panelists and attendees.
We are pleased to welcome Daniel Lee back to Yale Philanthropy Conference after making his YPC debut in 2010. Daniel serves as the executive director of the Levi Strauss Foundation, where he leads the organization's grant-making efforts in 40 countries focused on social justice, HIV and AIDS, worker rights and well-being, employee engagement, and disaster relief. One of the foundation's signature initiatives is Pioneers in Justice, which invests over 5-year spans in nonprofit leaders of color in the San Francisco Bay Area. An advocate for justice, a student of divinity, and the #1 Serena Williams fan in the world. I think some people might disagree with you on that. We are thrilled Daniel is bringing his inspirational, thoughtful energy to YPC. With that, I'll hand it over to Daniel to introduce Judy.
Daniel, I think you're muted. Sorry to interrupt you.
All right, we'll start again. Take 2. Can you hear me? All right. Thank you so much for that warm and generous introduction. And I want to start by offering kudos because it's really delightful to be part of a student-run conference. And at every turn, Elena, Eloise, Angela, and the rest of the committee, it's been a delight to work with you. You've been impeccable and spirited. Now, given that we're living in the throes of the most disruptive social and political moment that most of us have faced in our lifetimes, it is need to take a careful look at the purpose and the power of philanthropy. I can't think of a more apt choice for today's plenary speaker than Judy Belk. Judy has been thinking, writing, and driving solutions vis-a-vis structural racism, pandemics, including HIV and AIDS that conspire as superbuttons to marginalization, and threats to democracy, And on each of these fronts, she's been working over the course of not days, 4 months, not 4 years, but many decades. And we won't do the math there. So by way of introductions, Judy Belk is the president and the CEO of the California Wellness Foundation. It's one of the largest foundations in California with nearly $1 billion in assets and granting out approximately $40 million annually. Cal Wellness's North Star is health equity and justice for people whose lives and wellness are too often determined by their race, their zip code, or their immigration status. And Cal Wellness and Judy have played a pioneering role in promoting and funding violence prevention as a public health issue. And I see a lot of Hope and Heal people, and shout out to all of you. A graduate of Northwestern University and its famed journalism department, 6 months ago, Judy was the recipient of the Northwestern Alumni Medal, the highest honor given to Northwest alums. That's pretty cool. So that's the official stuff. And pivot to how I see Judy in my eyes. And why Judy, I think Elena, Angela, and Eloise, why Judy is a spot-on choice to open this conference. So if you read her bio or work with Judy for any amount of time, we all know she's a brilliant strategist and grant maker. What I would like to amplify is that she's an equally potent and graceful commentator on the issues and events of our time. Judy's pen game, if you will, is unrivaled, and I'll say it here. Judy is the best short form writer in the field of philanthropy. I spent a curled up writer.com and look at the Twitter for that, where her writings in the New York Times, the LA Times, the Wall Street Journal, PR are all chronicled, and they're really wonderful study, both in content and form, and some of the best editorial writing around. And I laughed and I cried, really something. As a storyteller, Judy has the instincts of a novelist and wields a dazzling economy of words. And let's face it, how many people in academia and philanthropy can we say that about? And one superpower of Judy is her ability to communicate complex ideas in simple, clear sentences. And you don't learn this at Yale, but this is a handmaiden to relating well with a wide array of stakeholders, which is what philanthropy is all about. Judy is a maestro at toggling seamlessly between the realms of the personal, the historical, the social, and the political. And Judy always pairs this with a clear moral compass on where we're called to go. And finally, I want to say what makes this fun for me is that Judy can throw down in the art of crisis management and crisis communications. She would be on my speed dial, and she can do this as well as a few others. And that makes it fun for a moderator because people like that can handle any topic on the record. And Judy said, I don't want to see the questions. And so this makes it very emergent and real. I'd like to declare that I'm Vice President of the Judy Belk Fan Club, and I know that many more will be brought into the fold for the next hour of her admirers in the course of this session. So in the time that follows, we'll delve into Judy's personal and professional journey, the spaces where she finds her roots and her sense of purpose, and where she's reimagined and refashioned herself at moments of truth. And from there, we'll pivot to explore where we go in reimagining philanthropy. So are you ready, Judy?
I'm ready. God, what an introduction. Can you hear me okay?
Great. And you know, Judy, you're from Los Angeles. You're from LA, and the perennial question is, are you actor or agent? And let's make one thing clear. In this show, you're actor and I'm agent, and let's stay in our lanes. Okay, so let's start with, it all started for you in Alexandria, Virginia. And it's a leading or supporting character, I think, in all of your writings. Can you bring us into that world of your upbringing and how you carry it in your bones today?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm really delighted to be here. Like you, I've just been so impressed with what Elena and the rest of the team have pulled together. So it's terrific. I mean, the only disappointment is I wish I was there, not sitting in my daughter's bedroom, you know, looking at a screen. So that's a drag. And I'm not going to think that there's loads and loads of people listening. I'm going to try to see if I can just focus on having a conversation with you. And I should say, Daniel, you know me well enough that my favorite part is really doing what you're doing, asking the questions. I mean, I'm sitting there cringing as you're talking about me because I think I'm pretty boring compared to other folks. So just know that this is making me feel a little uncomfortable. But let's talk about place. And place has been a through line through my work. And the first importance of place for me was really my hometown of Alexandria, Virginia, located right over the Potomac. And it is now a tourist destination. And it's so cool walking through Old Town. That's not the Alexandria I grew up in. I grew up in Alexandria in the late 50s, early 60s, where this country was having yet another reckoning with race. And I was kind of right there. And the first thing that was always really just clear to me was I was in Alexandria, Virginia, located literally 8 miles from the White House. And my life was really determined by another place in Richmond, Virginia, the seat of the Confederacy. And it impacted me in a variety of ways. Probably the most important way it impacted me was, even though I lived, 10 miles from the White House, I did not have access to water or to indoor plumbing for the first 11 years of my life. And that really impacted me in a variety of different ways that I didn't know until later on. One, the bathroom is still my favorite room in any house. A house can never have too many bathrooms. And second, even in our work here at Cal Wellness, there are folks in California that still do not have access to clean water, safe water. So my staff knows that I'm a real easy sell when I say maybe we don't have enough resources or we're done for the year. It's like, hey, it's a water project. Because I lived not having the resources. So place becomes really important. And now I'm running a public health foundation where our North Star are the social determinants of health, and place, where you live, plays a huge role whether or not you're healthy or well.
Can we talk a bit about your parents and your family life growing up? What stands out in terms of the values and the proclivities and the norms they passed on to you, Judy?
Well, my mother was kind of the central figure in my growing up, and she's pretty much of a badass in many ways. She had 6 kids, by the time she was 30. And I would say the most transformative impact that she had on me, which is about courage. And, I know we're going to get into courage a lot. That's my quest, how to be a courageous leader. And my mother, again, just remember place, Alexandria. When I started school, it was, it was about 8 or 10 years after the Brown decision. But Virginia had different ideas about folks like me attending public schools. And so for the first year that I attended, my sister and I, we were bused across town to a separate but very unequal school, even though there was a perfectly fine school next door, or just within a block. And my mother really just got annoyed because the bus that was supposed to pick us up every day was always late. And around that time, group of community organizers and a coalition of philanthropists and attorneys, they were looking for families to join a court case to test the Brown decision in Alexandria. And my mother, who was only 22 at the time, said the Belk girls are in. And that changed my life. It was a courageous decision on the part that she made. And I didn't know it at the time, Daniel, but it was the first exposure that I had to the power of community organizing, community empowerment, and philanthropy, because there were Blacks in Alexandria that were organizing and were really looking for families to be a test case. And this effort was funded by the Jewish philanthropic community in Alexandria. That was a game changer. And there were many families who didn't raise their hand because there were threats, life-threatening threats. So my mother was really instrumental in courage in a variety of different ways. And she's like so many mothers who want the best for their children. She wasn't trying to make history, but she did. And so if you want to know more about her, if you are ever in Alexandria, you should go to Fort Ward Park, where there is a Black History Heritage Park, and you will see my mother there identified as an icon in Alexandria history. And when she passed away way too young, in 2005, the Washington Post also did an article on her. So that's the neat thing about Google. Every time I miss my mama, I just kind of read the story. So you can also Google her, Maydell Casey Belk. And, you know, she, in small and big ways, she made a huge difference. And so I didn't know it at the time, but she was a role model by just being fearless.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. One of my heroes is Viola Davis, who I think is pure truth. And she has said, she actually grew up 10 miles from you, from Alexandria in Falls Church.
I'm sorry, Daniel. I didn't hear the name.
Viola Davis.
Okay.
And she grew up in Falls Church, Virginia. And she said very famously, people need permission to dream. And she talks about, for her, this happened when she went to the theater and saw Cicely Tyson for the first time, and in front of her eyes to see Cicely Tyson moving from a teenager to someone who is 80 or 90, that gave her permission to dream. And I'm curious, do you agree with that statement? And I'm just, apart from your mother, is there someone or an experience who gave you that permission?
Well, it's really funny. For the first 11 years, it was a joke in my family, but for every birthday, my dream was to have running water. That's what I kept dreaming. I kept saying, if I could only have running water in an indoor toilet, I promise I will never ask for anything else. So I say that because I felt my dreams were deferred because I was so focused on figuring out how to get through every day without access to water. And I would say it's interesting that Viola Davis mentioned arts, because arts play a huge role in my life as a storyteller and as a communicator. And I remember, again, as a result of philanthropy, a white philanthropist in Alexandria just believed that every child should have exposure to the arts. And so she underwrote, you know, my community, or, you know, I was part of a group that got to have exposure to the arts on an ongoing basis. And I remember seeing my very first live performance at the National Theater in DC. It was the opera Carmen, and I was just mesmerized, and I've just been a fan of the arts since that, and storytelling. It was just magnificent for me. And again, the power of philanthropy. And that is something that has been a through line also through my life. And then I would say, because of that, I got involved in theater, and the drama coach at my high school became a mentor to me. And when I was thinking about where to go to college, she encouraged me to think big, and was the first person who told me about Northwestern, which I thought at the time, I can't go there because it's in Seattle. And of course, it's outside of Chicago. That's how limited my life was. And that was a huge decision for me.
Wow. Wow. There's actually been a correction that Viola Davis grew up in Central Falls, Rhode Island, not Falls Church. Thank you, Jill Davison, for that.
Yeah,
correction.
I would have. And I also want to make a correction, just because we want to be facts. I did graduate from Northwestern, but it was the School of Communications, not journalism. They have a great journalism school, but I was communications with a specific focus on radio, television, and film. So I'm a proud Northwestern alum now.
So we're going to have a little bit of a communications exercise here. And some of you have heard this on the NPR Marketplace podcast. If you had to describe your job in 5 words or less, what would those be?
Well, I'll give you the fun one, which you'll think is sort of flip, and then I'll try to get a more conservative one. But best job in California, by far, is how I would describe it. And if you wanted me to be more, subdued, I would say I invest in people and ideas, but it is the best job in California.
In your life, have you had any issues or challenges explaining what you do to any certain people in your life, or any groups of folks in your life?
Oh yeah, my crazy but lovable family, which keeps me really grounded. When I tell them what I do, especially my brother Ricky, he'll say, sister, people paying you to give away their money. Sounds like a racket to me. Like, tell me again what you do. Or, one of the things, because as I told you, I love asking questions. So anytime I'm in an Uber or car, and we'd start talking, and I'll ask folks, what's your favorite nonprofit organization? What are you passionate about? And then they'll ask me what I do. And I said, well, I give money away, philanthropy. And it sounds like a good gig, but my brother says, I think you're doing something criminal. You're telling me people pay you to give their money away. But of course, they give me a hard time because I happen to live, in the Hollywood area of LA. And so when I say where I live, I say Hollywood. So the folks in Virginia say, there she goes, putting on airs again. I said, no, but I really do live in Hollywood.
So I'd like to take a bit of a gallery walk through your career, Judy. What makes it distinctive is that it's had a lot of breadth and a lot of depth in each of those. So
is that a nice way of you saying I'm just old?
Oh no, it's let us tap from the well of your wisdom. In the 80s, Judy worked in government and nonprofit for the city of Sunnyvale, and a nonprofit working with Bay Area governments. 15 years after that, worked in corporate social responsibility and corporate philanthropy at Target, Mervyn specifically, and 10 years at Levi Strauss & Company and the Levi Strauss Foundation. And I'm proud to walk in your trail. And then finally, the last 20 years or so in private philanthropy at Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors as well as Cal Wellness. So what rises to the fore when you think of what you learned and what parts of your toolkit that you gained in each phase? And I'm sure some of these might be surprising.
Oh my God. So in the different phases, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had an amazing career. I've always said I've been fortunate in both love and work. I've chosen wisely. The one thing that I would say is that one of the reasons why I really believe that my current job is like the best job ever is that it really pulls together all of those threads. My work and my understanding of government and public policy, my really, what during the Levi's literally opened up the world. So this idea of us being connected as I'm dealing with a global pandemic. So that was really key for me. Working, advising high net worth individuals on their giving during my years at Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors, and really connecting them to communities in ways they might not have been connected, as well as dealing with folks, which I just say so odd. What should I do with my money? Not knowing, not having that passion, where, it's like I don't have enough resources to deal with all the amazing community partners. So I brought all of those into where I am today. It's been a great ride. Not that it's quite over yet. I think the through line, if you asked me what skill has helped me, has been my communication skills, the storytelling skills, including even, at this job, it's the first job, Daniel, that I've ever had where I get paid to write. It's performance reviews. My board wants me, I have to write, blogs or an opinion piece, at least 2 or 3 a year. I said, you're paying me to write. You wouldn't have to give me a dime to write, but the fact that it's in my performance goals, I think it's pretty cool. I'm a working writer at some point. So.
Well, I want to go back to that point about getting permission to dream, because Judy, you gave me permission to dream. I became an executive director at age 38. This was in 2008. And when I look back on my last 12 years in this role, it was a lot of deer in the headlights and a lot of imposter syndrome. And then there were 2 things. Number one, I finally looked at the demographics and I was like, of course you didn't feel like you belonged. And then number 2, I have to say, knowing that you were there in my role, paving the way, 18 years before that for a full decade, and also creating these high watermarks, it is something that our team of 6 live up to, are so proud to live up to every day. So I want to say thank you for helping me dream. And I want to ask you a question about how you've navigated the philanthropic world as a Black woman. So a bit of numbers. In 1980, 1.6% of foundation leaders were people of color. 1.6. When you became executive director of the Levi Strauss Foundation in 1990, that was around 2 or 3%. It was 6% when I became executive director in 2008, and today it's a little bit better, 8%. So, and when we talk about racialized human suffering and being a voice when one is an outsider and navigating being an insider and an outsider, there's an exhaustion factor. How
Yeah,
have you
you're
navigated
right.
that?
Exactly.
Mm.
Well, boy, I have a lot of stories regarding that. And it's really interesting. I often think that, and someone actually mentioned this to me, and I ended up writing about it, that why are you always talking about race? Why are you always talking about race? And, I don't get up in the morning talking and thinking about race, but invariably something will happen where I'm just going on doing my thing, and it just comes up in little and big ways. It reminded me, Daniel, in my early career when I was at Target in Mervyn's, and I was out in East Texas, and I had finished a site visit, and I asked the young receptionist if she would call me a cab. And so she was very, cheerful, and she's calling the cab, and obviously the cab driver asked her, well, can you describe this person? So she described every detail of me, to the fact that she looked over and says she's got black shoes on.
Mm-hmm.
But she didn't describe me in the most obvious. So finally, after she hung up, I said, why didn't you just say, look for a tall black woman? She said, oh, I didn't want to offend you in any way. I said, but I am a tall black woman. If you had said, look for a tall, ugly black woman, maybe we might have some issues. So that issue kind of about race. I don't know if you know the story. When I got up enough nerve and applied for the executive director job at Levi's, I had met with loads of folks, because at Levi's, you gotta talk to 50 people. But I finally made it, and I was going to be talking with Bob Haas. And Bob Haas at the time was not only the president CEO, but he was chair of the board of the foundation. And so we come in and talking, and the first question he asked after we're talking is, what do you think a company like Levi's should do about racism?
Mm.
And you have to mention, this was like in 1990. And so I shared what I did. And I remember going home to my husband, and I said, Bob Haas asked me, well, right? He said, you didn't answer it, did you? And I said, well, yeah. He said, it was a trick question. He's trying to find out if you're rap, whatever. Well, anyway, I did get the job. And the reason he'd asked me was my first project was to launch an initiative around anti-racism, Project Change, which is a very proud piece of work. But so those are the funny and the positive ones. The ones that are a drag is, I'm out with someone on my team, at Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors, I go into a family office, and they talk to the person on my team as if she's the vice president, and I'm the vice president. It's because I'm Black. And then I would say most recently, again, as this country has had to deal with reckoning, there's been an expectation, especially for those of us of color, that it's like, the brothers and sisters are saying, well, hey, you're in the room. What you gonna do? What are you gonna do? And I take that challenge, but it's an added burden that, my white counterparts don't have to deal with. And there's a joke. It's not a joke. I think it's true. that there's been studies that say when you walk into a room, the first thing people just notice and put a negative connotation on is your gender, your race, and your weight. So as a Black woman who could probably, lose a few pounds, I'm in deep doo-doo in any room I walk in before I open my mouth.
Mm-hmm. There's a question on the sidebar that I noticed, this is the question I ask myself all the time. How do we deal with anger and even rage? This is almost a spiritual and existential question. How have you dealt with it over the years?
Well, one, anger has really helped me out. It has really given me courage. I don't think I'm the most courageous person in the world, but because as a person that I have experienced so much injustice in my life, starting with not having access, to indoor plumbing. I'm sure if my kids were listening, say, you're going to talk about indoor plumbing again, Mom? I'm saying it was traumatic. What can I say? But so any injustice gets me angry and gets me riled up. And I've been able to challenge that into action. Because as you know, philanthropy can move at a very slow and, politely and politically correct thing. Time in philanthropy is like a double-edged sword. Great that we, like at Cal Wellness, can have a 10-year strategy. Not so great that we can't get the money out to the community fast enough. So this anger, and it really gets me around injustice. The idea that someone would treat me differently, because, of the color of my skin or anyone, or injustice, gets me riled up and gets me motivated and moving. I would say, I don't know, do I get to ask you a question? What about you?
Yeah.
I mean, what about anger? Because you're always smiling, Daniel. How does anger show up for you? Because I don't think I've ever seen you really angry. So how do you deal with that? And I know you've been expression pissed off sometimes.
Yeah, a few things. One is, parents taught me, growing up Asian American in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, it taught one of those life skills was blend in and bleach out, and not make waves. But I've learned part of my job is actually to raise hell and to interrupt the conversation and disrupt. For me, there was a great essay called "The Power of Anger and the Work of Love." It was either Audre Lorde or Abraham Rich that really had an impact on me when I was coming out in the height of the HIV/AIDS movement. That it is anger that guides the work of love, and for me, it's having good friends that I can kvetch with and have a good drink with at the end of the day. I was really struck by your writings, Judy, because I have a sense that they might be a channel also to say what needs to be said and not have to tell stories of your life over and over again, because they're powerfully poignant. And I tell everyone, once again, judybelkwriter.com, they're brilliant.
Oh, you're great.
Yeah.
Writing helps me make sense out of the world. And, I see stories in everything. I eavesdrop on conversations and, wonder what that means. Wonder what his or her story is. Folks who meet me, it's a joke within the foundation, they warn community partners, Judy's probably going to ask you about your story, because I find it so fascinating. And to me, it's a human connection. I'm always totally surprised and nervous when something I write gets picked up. You know, I have a lot of confidence about a lot of things, but you know, writing, and there's, you know, a couple of ways where I've gotten courage. One, I for the last, you know, 20 years, I've been part of 2 writing groups in the Bay Area and now in Los Angeles. Every other Saturday, I meet with this group of amazing writers. We have a writing coach. They could care less what I do during the day. It's like, what's on the page, Belk? And then this is another good example of the power of really amazing nonprofits. Hedgebrook. Any women writers or wannabe writers, check out Hedgebrook. It is a small but an amazing nonprofit located on Whidbey Island outside of Seattle. And they offer, I guess we can say we, because I just recently, I've been on their board, offer residencies for emerging and established writers. No expenses at all. It's radical hospitality. And the majority of women writers are women of color. And we always include in any cohort a woman from outside the US. They gave me confidence because, you know, you submit something and to apply, you have to submit a portfolio that's peer reviewed, blind. So I've been fortunate to get 2 residencies there. It's a great philanthropic story. It was launched by Nancy Norhoff, a philanthropist who, when she had got a significant amount of resources, wanted to do something special. She was an environmentalist. She wanted to support women writers. She talked to women and said, what do you need to write? And they said, place and time. And so she founded Hedgebrook, and it was a game changer. You know, I can't talk enough about it. So writing is, it helps me make sense out of it. If I'm really annoyed, really angry, I will go for the blank page.
Folks, in about 6 minutes, we're gonna open it up for Q&A. So feel free to put questions in the chat. But first, let's have a little bit of fun getting at, I think, your prowess in managing crises. You told me that there have been 2 times in your career where you thought you were going to get fired, and at least one of those probably happened at Levi Strauss. I think it's really instructive to take these moments of urgency because they can often be incredibly instructive in retrospect. So pray do tell whatever you're comfortable with.
Yeah, in retrospect, not in the moment. The first crisis happened really early in my career. I was a lowly public affairs assistant at a Bay Area university, and my boss was leaving for the weekend, and he finally said, I think you can be on call for any press calls. And nothing usually happened, but I was really, I think I was all of like 23. I'm in charge. Well, a horrible tragedy happened on campus that weekend. 2 public safety campus police got in an argument, and one ended up shooting the other one, killing them. So I run to campus, and as I arrive, one public safety officer is being carted out by the coroner, another one in handcuffs. So I'm working really hard to get a statement for the press, and then I'm contacting the vice president of administration. And I said, here's the statement. And he said, we're not going to make a statement. And I said, what do you mean? He says, I prohibit you from making a statement. We're just going to see if this can blow over. Well, the press started calling, and I said no comment, and one of the press folks, really? No comment? Can you even affirm? Can you just at least validate that this happened? And I said, I can't confirm or deny. It was horrendous. So what did I learn? At that moment, after that moment, it was the most embarrassing moment that I've managed, press relations for many organizations, is I decided, after I licked my wounds, Belk, you're going to have to work the rest of your life. You need to be sure that you are in a situation when you know what the right thing to do is, that you have the power to do the right thing. And if you have any doubts that you can't be a manager, just check out this bozo who told you. So that was when I kind of decided I'm going into management because I never want to be in that position again. So that was
number one.
That was a huge, it was painful. I can still, my heart still going when the press kept saying, really, Belk? You can't confirm or deny. And then the other one was at Levi's, and it's, it was at that moment, I do remember going home thinking, and with this incident, I asked Raj, how much money do we have in our bank? Because I'm going to probably get fired. I had just completed a view of values for the foundation. They were beautifully crafted. I was so proud of myself, Daniel. And it included something saying, we will not support any organization that discriminates to anyone on the basis of sex, sexual orientation, or whatever. And I remember the day that someone on my staff came in and said, we were just contacted by the LGBT members of the company wanting to know, given what these value statements were, why are we making grants to the Boy Scouts? We didn't make a lot of grants to the Boy Scouts. It was matching gifts, but the foundation's name was on it. So just through a lot of effort, I recommended, and the foundation board agreed, that we would discontinue funding the Boy Scouts. And it became a national firestorm. Bob Haas received 100,000 cut up Levi patches. The conservative radio, that was just getting started, called for a boycott of all of Levi's products, and I was the spokesperson. And didn't matter that we knew, and our employees, at that time, there were many employees located throughout the South and in more conservative areas. And so I honestly, it was huge. We had one of our major customers, I think the CEO at the time of Penny's was on the board of the Boy Scouts, putting pressure on the core pieces of business. And I had a huge parade of senior leaders coming through the doors, my door, saying, Judy, I thought the foundation's work was supposed to make people like us. They ain't liking us. What are you gonna do?
Mm.
And it's the first time that I've done a crisis management plan where, you know, you think of these crazy things that would happen. Everything I put in happened, including Senator at the time, the late Senator Helms, putting a rider on an appropriations bill recommending that Levi's products not be sold at any military base. It's failed, but that's what we were dealing with. As I look back on that, now it's probably one of my proudest moments. It didn't feel so good at the end. And I'm just saying, any minute, Bob Haas or somebody's going to come in and say, you gotta go. And that didn't happen. And that has probably a lot of credit to the Haas family, to the business leadership. And I have to say, in retrospect, how I managed that crisis.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me say a few things as far as the epilogue. This was 1992, and you know there were 100,000 letters. There had to be a separate room to actually put those hate letters. But it was the first time any multinational corporation stood up to a consumer campaign. The New York Times wrote about this in 1992, and they're very good writers. And I just want to read a sentence. In reversing the usual pattern of corporate obeisance to interest groups, especially religious fundamentalists, who in the past have successfully pressured mass market companies, here's the punchline: Levi Strauss is taking a hard line on the new diversity of society, which I think really nails it as far as how ahead of its time, just despite how unpopular it was. It took 30 years almost for the Boy Scouts of America to come around. And I want to say, like, we have a jury of peers of people we both know, and I asked them, like, what is Judy's superpower? And they said, like, these were CSR challenges that no one would want to face. She was empathetic, transparent, and smart, very smart. And that's Debbie Landesman, who I know is on. And Bob Haas says, when something important is on the line, I could always count on Judy to be straight with me, even when her views were not comfortable. And I once was told that a true friend is someone who is willing to tell you the very worst. And in the end, Judy's principled candor helped us make better decisions, live up to our values, and stand out from our peers. And that's Bob Haas. And
that means a lot.
Yeah, and you know, two people also, Merle Lawrence and Richard Wu, said Judy's superpower is literally speaking truth to power. In a world where truth is an increasingly rare element, Judy's ability to speak truthfully, regardless of who is in the room, and especially when there's power in the room, that's a vital superpower for change. So my last question is, what are your pearls of wisdom about speaking truth to power? Because apparently you're pretty good at it.
A couple of things. Like I said, I don't feel like I'm all that courageous, but a couple of things. One, some really bad things happened to me in my childhood and before I was 30. The last being the loss of my older sister Vicky to gun violence. I'm one of 6 kids, and we were raised in twos. So Vicky was my twosie. We were, just about a year and a half apart. So one of the things that helps when I'm really getting shaky knees, saying, wait a minute, you survived the loss of Vicky. Are you telling me you can't survive the loss of, or whatever would come when making a bad grant? What are you thinking about, Belk? So that, I know that's weird, but in a way, and I keep thinking it's Vicky giving me courage. So that's number one. Number two, I really, and it sounds like, oh, the elder talking, but I really think that you kind of need to decide what's your parameters. Like, I just decided early in life, especially after that early experience on the campus, you can't pay me enough money to lie. I don't lie for anybody. And and you have to also believe, and this has helped me in interviews, so this is a little tip, is you need to be interviewing whoever you're going to work for, like, are they good enough for you? It's usually the opposite, where you're trying to impress them. You need to think, are you good enough? Because I think I'm an asset in, to any organization. I work hard, I don't know everything, but you're going to get 120. So the issue is, are you good enough for me? And that gets into values. First of all, you got to understand what your values are, and then you find a place where you can be your authentic self. And it's a journey. And you need to be able to say, this isn't gonna work for me. And I just know that I do my best work in a more diverse environment. And Cal Wellness is the most diverse organization I've ever worked in. The majority of my amazing colleagues are people of color, as like the state that we serve. The majority of my board are people of color and women of color. And that, I think, and it's been shown, you do your best work. So I would say, get real clear about what you stand for. It doesn't mean that you have to work for pennies, but it does mean that you need to be really clear. And then it really becomes clear to, and I don't even think to power, it's like, and I think I do my best. One of the reasons I was very successful at Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors, I advise some of the richest people in the world, but money, just because you inherited money or you made money, you got to do more than that. What you gonna do with it? And I just have always been comfortable with that. I think that's why Bob Haas liked hanging out with me, because great that you're part of the Haas family, but I want to know who you are and what are you going to do and how can I help you do that?
You've paved the way with your authenticity that we've seen here today, and paved the way for people like me to flourish, just knowing that people like you are out there. And I want to just make a comment that so many leaders, their tendency to manage up to their boards or outwards and not serve their staff is remarkable. And you are actually famed for building people's careers. And just one of the things that one person said about you is that one thing people value is your directness, and you always know where you stand with Judy. There's no subtext. And she's very quick with praise, but isn't also hesitant to let you know what you might have done differently or better. And that, of course, is critical to building and nurturing talent. That's from Debbie Landesman. I just want to appreciate you for bringing that mold to philanthropic leadership, because my look around the field, it's rarer than you think. So I want to thank you. We have room, I think, for one question here, and I wanted to, this is one that I think is a really interesting one for you. This is from Sonia Martin, and I'd like to ask Judy how she thinks philanthropic organizations and institutions can step in and affect change in politically unpopular areas. For example, support for people recently released from prison, or for those who are substance abuse disorders. Thanks for the wonderful discussion. I think we'll have time for just one question, and this is it.
Oh, shoot, I feel like then I've talked to him. That's a great question. And I would say, again, it's really, the philanthropic sector is really huge and very, diverse. Clearly, the piece that I hang out with are those who are social justice funders. But I think because I've worked with I'm on a family foundation board, CERDNA, which is a social justice funder. I've worked in the corporate sector. I've advised individuals. And I think there is more, there's more interest in dealing with the unpopular topics, and maybe we give credit for. In some cases, there's not. I mean, I never understand why private foundations are as conservative as they are. I mean, there's reasons for corporate funders, but I've just shown that Levi's hasn't. So what is it? What's the worst that can happen? You're going to make a bad grant, and maybe at Cal Wellness, the worst that can happen, I guess, to a private foundation is that you're investigated by the Attorney General. We've been investigated twice and survived that. It was all politically motivated. I think a lot of it comes from having the right people around the board table. And this is the one area that I think for some of the large foundations is the area that really needs some attention. If you think we've been slow in putting folks of color heading the foundations, check out who's sitting around the table. And I know that I'm very fortunate. My board is like pushing me and say, you need to move, honey, and giving me the resources to do it. We follow all the rules, but for example, a perfect example, private foundations can take a stand on executive orders, which was a nice tool to have during this past administration. But some foundations just wouldn't go there. It's too political. Like, what's going to happen? So that's an example. And then at Cal Wellness, we always try to go where there is a gap of leadership. So I'm not proud to say it, but we are, the largest funder of gun violence prevention in the state, one of the few in the country that has an explicit. I wish we could have more join us. And so I think it's changing who's making the decisions, education, and then collective action.
This time has just flown by, and I think you and I could do a podcast series, like 15 episodes. Love and life, about pandemics. I want to thank you just for paving the way for so many of us. I want to thank you for your pen game, and thank you for being a wonderful rouser for justice. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I had all these questions, Daniel, I wanted to ask you, but thank you. It's been an honor. This has been really fun.
Thank you so much, Judy and Daniel, for sharing your stories, sharing your experiences, sharing your advice. This has been an incredible kickoff to Yale Philanthropy Conference, and really opened up some of the themes that we'll explore a little bit more tomorrow, starting at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. So grateful for your leadership in the social sector and your joining us tonight. Thank you.